going to call this public properties meeting to order. I know we have the pool we're going to discuss, and then we're also going to discuss green burials at the cemetery. And I had that on second, but I think since we have so many people here for that, we'll move that up first, because we're going to talk about the pool for a while. So Jansen, why don't, if you want to give us an overview. I know Mr. Lamb submitted this as a request for council action, but now I just found out he's not able to be here today. So maybe you can give us an overview of it. And
Okay. Yeah, the request was for natural green burials at Spring Grove Cemetery. That was brought about from Mr. Lamb. And I guess we need to discuss if this is possible, because according to our current ordinance, 94304, all burials must be in a permanent vault, steel or concrete, with no bottom steel concrete vaults. And I guess we need some clarification as to if the request is for a natural burial or a green burial, because there's a bit of discrepancy between the two. A true green burial is hand dug to about a depth of 3.5 feet, and a natural burial is just the normal process, 5 feet deep, with no embalming in the body placed, and there can be bottomless vaults placed in. Without having that information right now, it's kind of hard to discuss it, but I do have some concerns with it as far as the bottom sealed vaults go. We don't allow them right now because graves in rainy weather tend to fill up with water, and it makes it difficult to lower a casket in basically it's an arched concrete vault down on top of it, and we've had some problems with those in the past. I did speak with Mac Industries today, and they don't sell bottomless vaults. They sell a bottom seal vault that has holes in it for, basically she told me it was for Jewish burials, to where there's holes in the bottom for the ashes to return to dust, and go back into the earth naturally. Nino has some other concerns with
I did, and I can speak to it, I guess, and likewise, I share the same concerns that Jansen addressed, but I guess there needs to be clarification, because when this was originally brought up to me through Jansen via Mr. Lamb, Councilman Lamb, green burials, so I called the health department asking about, and their reaction was the same about green burials. I called the state health department, just as Jansen explained, the burials are typically hand dug, 3 feet deep. There were some emails that were exchanged thereafter that Mr. Lamb had referenced that he's looking more at a natural burial, but he's not here, and again, I can't speak for him, so I don't know the details with respect to the natural burials.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
I did meet with Bill. He was, concerned because of the, it seemed like he had information and the city's information were in conflict with one another. He said what he's found is that if it's an existing cemetery, then the rules are different than if somebody wants to do a natural burial, like on their own property or, in somewhere that is not an established cemetery. And he described it. Now, we would have to do the research. Bill's not here, I take it? Okay. We would have to do the research on what is the correct information and what is not. The way he described it is in an established cemetery, as we would be, that it would have the side vault walls, but not the bottom. It could be dug with a machine. The difference is that the body is not embalmed, and I think it needs to be, if I remember correctly, the body is placed in a casket or container that will disintegrate as well, as opposed to being sealed in.
Yes, additionally, Mayor, if I may, I spoke to Frank Waite from Waite & Son, and I asked if, in my 13 years here being service director and overseeing the cemetery in that capacity, never encountered a family asking, we've never had this, and so that's why I was a little confused. And Quite frankly, Mr. Waite said that he really, he's had very minimal discussions with the family at that time with respect to a burial as being described, so that's why I wasn't sure where it would go.
Bill claims that 20% of the burials are green or natural, or requested to be green or natural, but we're not seeing it here in the city, at least have not of late.
Now, we average 80 to 81 burials a year, and again, in 13 years I've been here, this is the first that it's surfaced.
What was the health department's concern?
Well, with respect to Mr. Lamb's request or concerns, when I understood it as natural burial, I called about, a green burial. That was the discussion at the home, a green burial. The green burial was totally hand digging, 3 foot deep. It's not a burial that's conducted in this area that would fit this cemetery. That was the concern in the discussion. And again, having that minimal knowledge, we wouldn't want our employees hand excavating a burial 3 foot deep with the animals excavating the remains and so forth. So that was that discussion, which then prompted emails back and forth from Mr. Lamb. That wasn't what he was intending, but again, that's how it was proposed initially, as a green burial. And that's the understanding of a green burial versus natural. Those are members of the
I
cemetery.
was gonna say, we
commission.
have several members of the cemetery commission. Does anybody want to weigh in or have any opinion?
I just wanted to say,
Teresa?
yeah, I don't have an opinion either way on these, but from what I've heard, you have to have a section dedicated if you do this to this. And, you know, in 1997, the city adopted, or the official document of the Spring Grove Cemetery is the master plan. And in that ordinance, it says it's the official document to guide development in Spring Grove Cemetery. So I'm just concerned about leaving the master plan here and going off onto something else, because, as I say, this is, I can give you the ordinance number, that the city adopted that master plan, and I just don't want to see us going off in another direction, since we have that guideline there already. And also, I might throw out, I'm kind of disappointed that the cemetery commission has not been informed that this is the first I've heard of it, and or the Friends of the Cemetery. I just think it, you know, the cemetery commission their duty is to investigate and study and make recommendations to council, and we didn't hear anything about this, so I throw that out.
And I have to agree with you, because the first I saw it was when it was going to be on this agenda, and I tried to contact Mr. Lamb unsuccessfully, and that's not, he was just busy, so I couldn't reach him. I do know, I don't think there's, at least in my lifetime, been burials in the city limits. Now, I know of one that was done in a township surrounding the city when I worked at the funeral home, and I believe they had to go through quite a long process through the state to get the permit to have the body buried on their property. And that, I do not remember if there was a vault or if it was a natural burial or green burial, it was called.
When is the next cemetery commission meeting?
Tomorrow.
And it's actually at the mausoleum.
Oh,
The mausoleum's been, we're going to inspect the remodeling or the refurbishing of the windows and the doors.
And I apologize for getting you all here today. I was told that it was to be on the agenda, and then when I walked in, we just found out that it was supposed to be pulled, but you were all here, which is why I wanted to move it up so you didn't have to wait through everything here. But I guess my recommendation would be that maybe we let the cemetery commission talk about this first, and then maybe come back to public properties. Mayor,
Yeah, I don't think there's any rush. Out of fairness to the cemetery commission, we weren't aware that there was even a request for council action. Apparently back when Tim was here, Bill had asked Tim to investigate it, but had also put in a request, so it was in public properties, but not being acted upon, and then he requested to bring it forward We thought it was a brand-new request. Turns out it's been pending for a while.
And one other question, I won't put Jansen on the spot, but Teresa, you, or John would probably know. Even if we in turn cremains, they have to be in a sealed container to have those.
Because we've talked about that.
Correct.
Because a lot of people want to scatter them to the wind.
And we don't allow that.
They don't allow it. They do it.
No, I
but
know.
not all-
Unbeknownst to the city or
Yeah,
administration.
right.
Yes,
They might do it
Teresa's
in their
correct.
backyard somewhere, but to do it on a public, cemetery, that's not allowed.
Well, I appreciate everybody being here. I'm sorry we punch out today for this, but I would like to have the, unless the committee feels differently.
I agree that it probably should go to the cemetery commission first and get some more research. This is the first I heard about it.
Is there any other questions from the cemetery commission at this point, or any other comments, or?
I can't hear. I'm dead in water.
John, we were saying you're the best person on the cemetery commission. We're gonna hold off until the cemetery commission and the Friends of the Cemetery can discuss this and research this a little bit more.
And then we'll bring it back to public properties at that point.
I think John had done some research about back in, with the old cemetery, they had one of the reasons they could not do the burials the way they were doing them was because of the health concerns, health department, the leaching out, and I think that's what,
Yeah, in 1883, there was a meeting of important people of the village, and the purpose was to, what are we going to do with the cemetery that we have? And they decided that there were a whole bunch of reasons why they needed to find some other land outside of the city. And one of them was the fact that there was a doctor there who expounded on the water that drains, that it would carry things from the decomposing of the body and such. And so they wanted to be out of the city far enough, and they finally ended up Spring Grove, which at that time was out of the city.
Right.
It was sort of on the edge, but it was out. I'd also like to say that Spring Grove is a Victorian cemetery. And a Victorian cemetery is one that has monuments. And this green burial thing, they don't want any notification. In fact, things that I have studied over the last couple of days was these green burials started in England and quite a long time ago. And they have like 20 places there where you can have a green burial. Where was I going?
The markings,
the gravestones.
the monuments.
Oh, the monuments, yeah. Well, green burials in the basic sense is a piece of ground on a hillside where you go up and you dig a hole and you bury a person who is just wrapped in cloth in a cardboard box and no markings or anything. The idea is he's going to disappear from the world and the earth in a short time. You go back to find where it is, and you'll be lucky if you can find where it is. The situation here, we try to keep track of people, and genealogy reasons, there's a lot of people requesting that. And I think that's something that we would lose if we went with this green burial.
There is a place, I think in Portage County, where they do this. But it's out in the country, away from everybody, and it's, like he said, it's just hills. And I think it's Portage County, maybe around Ravenna or Portage County. But it's a lot, it takes a lot of space too, which we don't have.
Right, I was gonna say, just the dedication of 19, section 19 now, that's already dedicated, and like you stated from the master plan, dedicated for I don't say normal burials, but traditional, thank you.
Well, why don't we, oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, does anyone know if there are green burials just in the midst of regular established cemeteries? Does anyone, I don't know. It's never been done before, because as she said, I thought it was in a special area, large, open area out in the countryside. I thought that was the whole point.
Well, Cynthia, prior to your arrival,
Right.
I was aware of one burial that took place at a property, on the deceased property. And this has probably been 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. But if I remember correctly, I mean, it was in Lafayette Township.
Right.
And the family had to go through quite a bit of, a long process with the state to get permission for that. And I don't remember how the body was interned, if it was natural or if there was a casket involved.
And since there is a green burial cemetery not very far away, people have that option.
Right.
Well, if it's okay with Cemetery Commission, why don't we have it discussed and maybe a formal recommendation come, because we certainly appreciate the work of the commission and the Friends of the Cemetery. And again, I'm sorry that we got you here today and weren't quite ready to go forward with it. But
Stick around for the pool discussion, though.
we want to take just 1 second, if anybody, if you don't want to wait, we'll take a second. But we appreciate you coming and we'll keep you posted, and we will not do anything with this until the commission has a chance to weigh in on it.
Yes. Yes, I'll be there.
Teresa. Thank
Okay.
Thank you, John. See you, Mr. Gill.
I don't think it's compatible.
Yeah, the elevator, don't try to hit those chairs. Take the elevator. I know you can.
Yourself around here.
Take care.
Okay, our second item, which actually is the first item on today's agenda, was the discussion of the municipal pool at Memorial Park. And Chance and I know you have Mr. Whitmer here. We did a study of the pool, so I'm going to turn it over to you first, and we're anxiously waiting to hear your thoughts on what our options are.
A little timeline. Prior to my appointment, it was discussed that we look into the aquatic center feasibility study, and that was tabled. And within that time, we got the report from Mr. Chuck Whitmer, who's sitting to my right, from Interpool Consulting. Chuck did an inspection and evaluation of our pool, basically to look and see the possibility of repair and what that's going to cost. There's a lot of unknowns with repairs as far as what you can see from the surface without getting too in-depth with it, and the costs that are involved with that. Chuck, in his report, stated some estimates for those repairs. Nino and I met with him probably a little over a month ago, and we discussed the report and took it to the next step and did a pressure test on the lines of the pool itself. Dyna-American Plumbing tested the drain lines. That all came back good. When we pressurized the return line, those pictures that are before you are of the main leak through the diffusers. Chuck will elaborate on that. I'll kind of, if you want to take it away and go over your report, or.
Okay, whenever.
Yeah.
Ready? Thank you for having me. Thank you for the contract. Back in November, I made a visit out to Memorial Park and met with two city employees, Don Lahoughton, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, and Darlene Duncan. And they were very, very helpful in explaining the history of the pool, the issues having to do with the pool, and gave me a feeling for the program requirements, so forth. So I appreciate their efforts, and this report is more complete because of their activity. My contract with the city was 3 or 4 parts. One, they wanted me to go out to Memorial Park and do a comprehensive review of all aspects of the pool, structurally, mechanically, deck equipment, decks, fence, so forth. It excluded evaluation of the bathhouse. And of course, with the emphasis on health and safety. The second part of the contract was to bring options back on what had to be done, what could be done, and some possible cost estimates for doing that. And we wrote that up somewhat as a shopping list, because when you're dealing with repairs, it's a money issue. How much money can we afford? And sometimes they will do it over time, sometimes they will do it all. The cost estimates that were, I presume that you all have read the report, the cost estimates are kind of standalone. Obviously, when you put the whole package together, based upon the scope of the contract, there probably is some cost savings. And then to write a report, which I did, and finally to make some recommendations as to how I think the city should proceed. Now, after I wrote that report, the inspection of the underground plumbing was made recently, and what they learned is that these bottom return inlets, in other words, the filtered water, goes back and is distributed in the bottom of the pool through diverser caps into the swimming pool at one location, at least one location. It was leaking, and the dye was obvious. The mechanical contractor did it just right, and his recommendation about fixing it was correct. You need to get down in there and determine where the leak is, and then you do what is known as bracketing. From that location east, that location west, you test it again, and if it holds, then that is the extent of your break. If there's more leaks, you continue bracketing until such time as you can find it. That piping is PVC, and unlike your water department, so forth, where you can put sounding devices and hear it because it resonates. When you have PVC pipe under there, it doesn't resonate. Now you might be able to hear it, depending on how much below it is, but typically it's very difficult to locate underground piping that is PVC. So that was our contract, and last November we went out there, and in November I wrote the report, and the report is somewhat self-explanatory. I did start out with the current condition of the pool and try to explain in some detail exactly the issues out there. From there, and major issues out there were basically the gutter system, which was failing. Stainless steel panels that were put in 30 years ago were starting to bulge. The real reason for that is generally the stiffeners behind those panels have let go, the weld points have let go, and because they're tack welded on there. It's not a full penetration weld, and they're tack welded, so over time they're going to deteriorate and break. There was cracks in the pool and so forth. It was also explained to me that the kiddie pool had been removed a number of years ago, and there were some issues having to do with the depth of the pool that they felt from a program standpoint that having a shallower pool would be better for their program requirements. The only issue that I saw that was troublesome somehow was the slide was put in there in the deep end of the pool, replacing the diving standard, and that slide chute goes into about 10 foot, 11 foot of water. Typically, that wouldn't be unacceptable from the Ohio Department of Health. Usually 1 in 5 foot of water because there's kiddies going down in there and so forth. The mechanical equipment had been replaced recently. it was in good shape, and no matter what you would ultimately decide from an administration or council, the mechanical equipment would be sufficient for whatever you were trying to do. The only issues down in the mechanical room were the fact that a controller had been taken apparently to replace one on your indoor swimming pool, which would need to be replaced. And the only other issue that I found was that the tube and shell heat exchanger, the way you heat the pool is you have a boiler sitting over here, it sends hot water to a heat exchanger, and it takes back, the heat exchanger is pretty small and in bad shape. It was not replaced at the time that the other mechanical equipment was done. So, so I ran through the general conditions of the pool, and then we looked at the options. And my options for replacing the pool, the intent of that was not that that should be the decision necessarily, but everything has a cost factor. And the construction of the pool, the new construction of a new pool would have certain cost features that would need to be taken into place. So what I did was I identified 3 different typical techniques for building a brand new swimming pool with a different price tag, and they generally run anywhere from $100 to $150 a square foot. So the bigger the pool, and so forth. And then I tried to describe a little bit about what those, the differentiation of those different kinds of pools.
Sure. I mean, how large is the square footage there?
6,000.
Okay, thank you.
And square footage is always a tough deal, and I also qualified my report by saying that demolition is an issue there, primarily because the pool and the filter room have a common wall. And that comes into play a little bit later in my report. And there's other issues, deck, fencing, and so forth, that all would need to be replaced. So that is not a final price. That is just, it gives you some range in which to operate to make a financial decision, because ultimately the decision you'll make will be based upon programs and how much money you have to do it. Using that as a criteria, using the general conditions as a criteria, I then did paragraph by paragraph of the areas that needed to be fixed, and the method by which we would attempt to fix them, and with some pricing associated. 2 of the major expenses in that report have to do with the fact of shallowing the pool. Shallowing the pool has a cost. You have to move the plumbing, you've got to fill it in, and so forth. The other part is because you have new and old concrete, it's an issue, and typically, in order to resolve that problem, you put a PVC membrane in there. So of the total report, about $75,000 was fill in that deep end of the pool, move the plumbing, main drains, that, et cetera. And another $75,000 was to line the swimming pool with a PVC membrane to keep it watertight. Okay. But I went down the line, and if you were to just put a tape to it, the raw numbers, I think you're probably in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000 to repair this pool. As far as the recommendations to council and to the administration, we try to operate on a 50% philosophy. If the cost of the repairs is 50% or more of the cost of a new swimming pool, it's usually in the best interest of the owner to replace it, put a new pool in there. There's always danger on fixing an existing swimming pool, because even though we do the very best we can and we would try and identify every one of the issues, unless you fix everything, then there is a possibility that something else is going to break. And of course, it always breaks on the 4th of July. Typically. And when it does, it makes a lot of people mad. They spend a lot of money for fixing this pool, and now we gotta rip it up, we gotta put a liner on it, So the only way you can be sure in a repair job is to repair everything. And the best way of repairing everything is typically to build a new pool if there's a 50% opportunity. Since the plumbing, the return plumbing in the floor is broken, that presents another issue. And that would also have to be replaced, probably, or should be. The other issue has to do with the fact that if you are going to build another swimming pool, how would you do it? And the city already has a history of building a pool inside of a pool. Out of Memorial, that is a stainless steel pool inside of an existing concrete pool that was built 30-some odd years ago, and an L was attached to make it larger. We know because our company was involved in that project 30 years ago. I was involved in that project 30 years ago. So you do have a history of building pools inside of a pool. If 6,000 square feet of pool, existing pool, is more than what you need for the demographics, future programs, intent, then one of the options is to build a swimming pool inside of that existing swimming pool, removing the floor, adding floor, depending upon what you need to do in order to get the right depths for your programs. It also allows you to put a ramp in, and we will get into ramps here in a minute because I know that was of some interest to the city. ADA requirements and ramps and so forth, we'll get into that. Or I'll be happy to answer questions regarding that issue. But if you're going to build a new swimming pool, if you decide to build the swimming pool, putting the swimming pool inside the existing pool is a wonderful option. It's all of a sudden you don't have to worry about that common wall. You don't have to worry about demolition. You've got a lot of cost savings that you wouldn't have if you were to rip it out and completely replace it. So it all becomes a question of money, and it becomes a question of options, and it becomes a question of how far you want to go with this swimming pool. But if you want a pool, and if you want a pool in that area, and then I would say that the construction of a new pool inside of a pool is probably would be my recommendation, but we would work whatever the desire of the city has. Regarding the ADA issue, the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, spent a lot of years trying to figure out what to do around swimming pools. A lot easy to do with bathrooms and showers and stairways and so forth. Swimming pools were a problem, and it took them a long time to write the rules and regulations regarding it. And originally, when all this came into play, we were doing zero-depth pools, and we were putting ramps. Zero-depth pools are the ramps are very, very expensive because the slope on those are 1 to 12, so it takes up a lot of space, and there's a lot of concrete, and it requires elaborate stainless steel rails. We have not done a lot of ramps for a lot of years. The solution to that problem was zero-depth pools, and so you started out. But zero-depth pools typically transition into 1 or 2 foot of water, not into 3.5 or 5 feet of water. So transitions into zero-depth pools usually start out as some kind of a play pool with jets and umbrellas and waterfalls and that kind of stuff. The other issue is that the Ohio Department of Health requires that if the width of that's the deck, longitudinal width of the zero depth is greater than 6 foot, you have to put a lifeguard out there. So as a consequence, that becomes another cost, operating cost. And so as long as you make it 6 feet or less, zero depth, then you don't need a lifeguard. You make it larger and so forth, then you have to deal with lifeguards. But ADA requires, for that size pool, requires 2 means of ingress and exit. And that's easily done. I did give you 2 suggestions in my report. One that was my original recommendation, and then based upon city's interest in finding out more about what what a ramp would cost, a supplemental report that you got. And so, I'm here, gentlemen, so I'm available for questions.
I'll start. I have a couple. When you said 400 to 500,000, would that be just to get the existing pool up, operating, and open and compliant with everything,
Yes.
without anything really, or does that include the cost of doing something for ADA then too?
Well, the ADA would have to, whatever we did would have to be ADA. And within that thing, I think there was $250,000 or something like that for a kiddie pool within those, if you add all that stuff in.
And that's where you're coming up with the 400 to 500,
Correct, sir.
which would be building it within the existing,
Well, no, that would be fixing that existing pool.
okay.
Repairing what's there.
Repairing what's there and finding a way of getting some kind of a ramp type, zero depth opportunity, and by building a Z-shaped pool rather than L-shaped pool. Rather than putting a ramp inside the existing swimming pool. So the options on the repair are for repair of the existing swimming pool. It's not adding much. We had some money in there for replacing the slide if that was necessary, and some lifeguard chair footboards. I tried to make it complete, but there'll be odds and ends.
Okay. So option one would be the 400 to 500,000 then, just getting it compliant and getting it open. Okay, go
Did you
ahead.
have some more questions, Jim? Go ahead.
I guess then I wanted to talk, okay, our next step up is, I know I saw where you, with the zero depth, you talked about adding some water features maybe then too. And then that building within a building. What's our next step up from getting it fixed, compliant, versus adding a little bit and upgrading it?
Well, obviously, if you were to add the Z to it, you'd be adding some additional features that you don't currently have. That'll be a draw for your client. So that is an upgrade. It's hard to fix an old pool and really make it different than what it is right now. It was designed in a certain way. It's got a certain depth and configuration. You're somewhat limited to it. By shallowing the deep end of the pool, now you are changing the configuration of the pool. You can do a lot of things like aerobic training and so forth in the deep end. That right now, if you do aerobic training, it's going to be deep water aerobic training. So there are things that within the original proposal that do make it look different. By putting a liner in the pool, when people look at that, they'll think they're going into a brand new swimming pool because from an aesthetic standpoint, the deck will be new, the gutter will be new, the liner will cover.
Chuck, it's the same as the membrane and liner,
Same.
or so.
I call it it's actually a membrane. It's the same material that they put on top of parapet roofs.
Okay.
Okay, and it's a welded material, membrane. And it's waterproof as a consequence. It's the same stuff on parapet roofs. Matter of fact, it's made by the same company. They just put a different color on it, and put some ribs on it, and make it for the swimming pool industry.
Go ahead.
I think your report was very comprehensive, and I applaud you for it. It answered 99.9% of my questions. Obviously, we're going to be looking at the most common sense thing would be the least expensive. But on your recommendations of fixing something that's old, you're always going to have old problems. I like the idea of putting something new over what we have and be able to save money by doing that as far as constructing a new pool. I obviously am in favor of moving forward. Obviously, the funding is going to be a whole nother question. When we talked about whatever we do, it's going to include new gutters, new deck around it. But that bathhouse, I think if we want to, in my opinion, if we're going to go forth with the money for this project and figure out a way that we can do it, going to the public, I would like to see your recommendation of a new pool in the existing site to save money there by constructing it inside reconfiguring it and constructing it in the current site, but also a new bathhouse and new fencing around it. I mean, that would be what I would suggest. Again, the funding's gonna be the issue. That's my comments. You answered most of my questions 100%. I like the zero depth versus the ramp. You know,
My other comment, if I may, appreciate Chuck coming with your expertise tonight to this meeting. Talked about the 6,000 square feet currently in existence. If we were to build a pool per se, what's the maximum allowance then? Isn't like you'd have to constrict a foot width around the existing perimeter for the lines? I talked a little bit about that, I think. The optimal, the largest allowance versus going smaller, occupancy per square footage.
Well, it depends upon the method by which you build a swimming pool. But let's take one, which would be the least expensive, which would be a shotcrete type swimming pool inside of it. And essentially, you're making the pool 8 inches. You could potentially make the pool 16 inches widthwise, smaller, and 16 inches lengthwise, and 6 inches shallow. Because you can actually shoot the gunite right against the existing wall. And those are typically 8-inch walls, 8-inch walls. So 8-inch all the way around makes 16 inches.
Right.
Makes 16 inches. Typically the floor is pulled out of there, or you raise the whole pool in order to get your depth. So there's a lot of ways of building this thing, and a lot of them it's going to require some engineering and some approach. If you raise it 6 inches, then you have the responsibility of raising the deck 6 inches. So you have a cost of doing that versus pulling the floor out and keeping the elevation of the deck the same. So there are cost and engineering issues that would have to be taken into consideration before that made. So you could, I don't know what 8 inches all the way around is, but
Try to figure out the length.
But for the sake of argument, let's say it's 5,000 square feet rather than 6,000 square feet. I don't know, I'd have to, it's a foot roughly, and so where it is. So now, whether that is the appropriate size for what you're doing on there, that's really the issue, and that's really driven more by program requirements and what the Parks and Recreation people think that area needs and wants and would need to have for the next 20, 25 years, as best they can. Understanding that people's tastes change and kids change, and whoever thought that they'd be texting rather than watching television, for example. Okay, so things change, and we can't always anticipate what those changes are going to be, but do the best we can of determining what the program are and then making the pool appropriate. Now, it could be that a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot pool would be perfectly appropriate for what you want to do. You could have a little L-shaped area off that pool for a kiddie area and a zero depth. It would be easier to build the ramp in a new pool than it would be to try and put a ramp into the existing pool. So because you're shooting the pool anyway, now you're only talking about another 2 foot of concrete for a ramp, and then you could design it in such a way that you would start deep and go into shallow, as opposed to going shallow into deep. So ramp does become a possibility. It's not my favorite approach. It has issues. Stainless steel, there's a lot of stainless steel on both sides, and it has a cost. But if somebody would like to have that, then it's more of a possibility to do that in a new pool than it would be in the existing pool.
Yeah.
Sir, the 400,000 to 500,000 that you're coming up with, if I add the things that for the repairs that you have numbers for, that's 246,500. and then a number of the T and Ms that we don't know. So is your 400 to 500 kind of a guess of what those T and Ms are?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that does not include the 250 for the zero entry children's pool? That would be over and above?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, if that was the option, then we would be looking at 650 to 700?
Correct.
Okay, and then my second question is the fact, and your company was involved in it, the fact that we did the pool in the pool once already does not prohibit us from doing it a second time? There's no problems in repeating that?
There's only one potential area that would have to be determined, and that's that wall where it's bulging.
Yes, sir.
So that would have to come out.
Okay.
That, maybe that whole,
Fixed.
maybe that whole wall would have to be come out.
Be
So-
fixed or replaced?
Well, probably removed.
Removed.
Because we don't even want it there, we don't want it moving, because if it's
Okay.
moving, that whatever you put against it is going to move.
I got you.
So we
Okay.
would want to
It has
remove
to be
it.
stabilized.
I don't, I'll be frank with you, Mayor, I don't know of any pool that's done this 3 times. But the issue there is that, from my perspective, is that common wall between the swimming pool and the, now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't extend the pool, that would be,
So,
South.
well, is the length of the pool from the dike and shallow, is that an east-west?
East-west.
It is.
Okay, there isn't any reason why you couldn't move the pool west and give yourself a barrier between the existing filtration room and that pool and build from there.
no.
We did.
So
we
extend it further
extend it
east.
further east.
Yes, sir.
Or west, whatever
Right.
direction it is, away the opposite direction of the filter room.
Yeah, west.
And then not have that common wall anymore.
And not have that, and get rid of that common wall issue.
So that seems to be our problem, the common wall with the filter room?
It is as far as, fixing that pool or trying to put a brand new pool in.
Okay.
Putting a brand new pool inside the existing pool and leaving that wall there makes a lot of sense. And essentially, that's what you did 30-some odd years ago. That width of the pool was removed, and 90 degrees were put in, and that shallow area or shallower area L was constructed.
Okay.
That's essentially what you did last time. So you have a history of that in there.
And just one more clarification, if I could. The $250,000 estimate for the kiddie pool, is that what the Z is, or is a standalone kiddie pool?
It was meant to be, it could be,
Okay.
or I like the idea of attaching it to the pool
A Z shape?
as E-shape. And then you can
Because it gives us
accomplish,
other
you can
advantages.
accomplish some of the ADA
Yes,
requirements.
sir. Right, no, I understand. Okay. Thank you.
What do you think the time frame is? Is there any scenario that we would pick where this pool could be open for next summer?
Well, the answer is yes. The gutter would have to be caulked and fitted, you'd have to live with what you have. You'd have to go out and fix the return piping. It can be. It wouldn't be ideal, but it could be. Now, whether you could have it open for this season is another issue. It's already May.
Yeah, I was not thinking of this season, I mean a year from now.
2015.
Well, you can accomplish everything you want to do in this timeframe.
Okay, so no matter what option we could come up with, you could see it where it could be ready for a year from now.
Yes. I wouldn't wait too long, but the idea here in the swimming pool business is you don't want to wait until January, February to bid this work out, because the contractors are,
Down south, as you referenced before.
they're booked. And so you want to bid this project out in August, September, because that's when they're hungry and they're looking for work. And they would get started right away, and they would have a chunk of it done, whatever the rest of the year remaining.
That's a good question, if we do come up with the funding for it, to be able to go to the public and say,
Right. Now, the only other thing is the liner issue. Be blunt with you, there's only a couple of manufacturers, there's only a couple of people that do that. And they typically start out in Florida, and they work their way up. And so by the time they get up into the Medina area, it's sometime April or May. Okay. Now, if they had bad weather conditions down in Tennessee and Georgia, then they get delayed. And I've had a number of occasions where all of a sudden, if it's ready to rock and roll, and you can't put the liner in, because they just can't get to you. Because they're not gonna pull off a job in Georgia to start another job in Medina.
you're talking about a repair here?
I'm talking about the liner.
Whether
The
versus
membrane.
we repair or a brand-new pool?
Well, brand new pool, you don't have a membrane.
Okay.
That's
I
local,
understand.
that's a local contractor. Once he bids a job, you can hold him to a certain
Sure.
responsibility.
Okay. You answered my question.
Penalty clause, or whatever you want to do, okay? These liner issues, I'm just being frank with you, it's a problem. Now, if everything works out, great, but they book, okay? They're booking, and they get their down payment, and away you go. So I'm just being blunt with you.
I think you answered one of my questions already, and that was, if you build the new pool inside the old pool, did I hear you correctly that the areas that were bulging, those would be replaced?
It depends on what the overall size of the pool would be, but I would say at a minimum, you pull that stainless steel out of there, okay? And then shoot against that wall. You know, put your mesh, put your steel in and shoot against that, and get rid of that area that would be bulging. There's only 30 foot of it, roughly, 40 foot maybe. 40? I believe so.
Well, wasn't, I could be wrong, but wasn't there some concerns that whatever was behind that stainless steel, wasn't there some concerns at one point that that was eroded away?
Yes, I can tell you it is.
That's what's causing the bulging, I think, or my leaks.
Right, it is. I mean, you've got a leak, a major gutter leak right there, and I'm sure there was erosion, and it probably got soaking wet down there, and the well point's probably let go, and there's an A-frame type buttress. So maybe, you know, when we did that on a time material basis, it is possible that once we excavated back, and by the way, I won't be doing the work, but once the contractor excavates out the work, he might find out that is repairable. I don't think so, but it's possible. Put a new A-frame buttress, okay, stiffen it up, straighten it out, it's possible.
But that's, you don't know until you get into the excavation and actually explore it.
Right.
Okay, and then my second question was, is it safe to assume that we could get another 25 to 30 years out of it if we just repair it? I won't hold you to it.
You're not on the spot, Mr. Whitmer, so.
Well, I want to be honest with you.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to be absolutely honest with
I
you.
mean, we got 30 years out of the last fix.
Well, that was rebuilding it.
Well, rebuilding
It
it,
was
yeah.
it
And
was a
adding
pool
on.
inside of a pool. Everything was replaced at that time.
If we were to rebuild within the old pool, could it be safe to assume that we could get another 25 years out of it?
Well, that's a good question. I won't be around to verify. I will tell you that the construction techniques of 35, 50 years ago, and the type of concrete and steel and everything used, and the kind of pumps and everything else, is a lot different than it is today. We have much more of a throwaway mentality. On the other hand, relatively speaking, swimming pools are not that much more expensive from an inflationary sense than they were 25, 30 years ago. In some respects, pumps, motors, filters, all that stuff is significantly cheaper than what it used to be. So I would hope that, depending upon the scope of the project, we would do the level best to put as high quality of stuff in there that would be as long lasting. The only reason that, it was back when I first, was building these things, one of the questions that city council members would ask was, how long does a pool last? And the classic answer was, it lasts 20 years. And that's because the depreciation schedule on fixed assets was 20 years. So it was 20 years. But we've seen pools last for 50 or 60 years. Yeah, but they have to be properly maintained. And, you have to have a sinking fund built into your budget so that if something needs to be fixed, you fix it. Just like you replace a parking lot or replace heating systems in a building, maintenance. So having a sinking fund for maintenance of a swimming pool helps.
We found that out.
Right.
Okay, you mentioned you wouldn't do the work, but the contractors that do the work, do they give any type of warranty or guarantee on the work?
Well,
And what is that typically?
typically it's a one-year guarantee. And so if something's going to be happening to the swimming pool, it's going to happen the first year. I mean, that's been our view. If it's been properly designed and if the contractor is built to spec.
Is that regardless of whether it's replaced or repaired?
Yes, normally contractors' guarantees, including manufacturers' guarantees, warranties, are about 1 year.
And that's a norm.
That's a norm.
Does that include the liner as well?
Well, the liner is a different issue.
Well, what's
Because-
the normal, not the general?
Well, I'm just gonna tell you what the manufacturers say. They've got something like a 50, it doesn't matter what the warranty says, and they have something like a 15 or 20-year warranty in the liner. Except, that's on the welds. And welds are not gonna fail. But it can, the UV can work on it, somebody can cut it, and so forth. So we found that these liners typically last around 10 or 15 years. And then you have to replace them.
Chuck, what's the mill on the liner if you make it?
30, 40 mil.
40? So no, 60 mil, excuse me, it's just so you know, it's about a 1/16 of an inch, 60 mil, so that's,
Don't,
know that from roofing.
please don't, whatever that
We
is,
just had some roof
it might be,
membrane put on.
it might be 60, whatever it is.
Okay, so that's a 1/16 of an inch, so it's
Yeah.
not very
It's
thick.
not real thick,
No, but,
They're durable, I mean.
no, and there's other issues that you need to consider. One, the fact that pools should be filled with water during the winter time.
And that's one thing, one point out that we learned from Mr. Whitmer, because in the past, years ago, the philosophy here was to empty the pool, which unbeknownst to any of us until we met with Mr. Whitmer, is that type of pool, that type of construction needs not to be emptied, just lowered
Right.
a couple feet if that.
City of Cleveland, for example, builds pools to be emptied, and they're like bomb shelters. So they can empty them, and there's no issues with them. But typically, pools are not built that way, and you need to leave water in because it's a boat, and also you can get some deterioration. So you need to leave water in the pool. If you put one of those PVC membranes, it's a good idea to put a cover over the pool, a safety cover of some sort, because it can stain. So then you have issues with a liner that's staining. So it's not a panacea. The liners came into play back in about 1990, 95, and they were meant to fix your pool, make it look pretty. All the cracks, get rid of that. The
Aesthetics.
painting, no more painting. That was the intent. Steel pools that were rusting, put that liner in, problem's gone. That was the motivation for the PVC membranes.
Did you have something else?
Sure.
No, go ahead.
So this cover, you're talking about at the wintertime cover?
Yes.
Or evenings, or
No, winter.
just winter, when it's not in normal use?
Correct.
Okay. And then my second question is, as I'm reading your report, I think what we're talking about is what does it take to get the pool up and running? Are there other things or more things we could do to try to stretch out the longevity of it? Like if we replaced all the lines, if we did this or that? Or is your report comprehensive enough that everything that should be done is recommended to be done? Does that make sense?
I will answer, yes, I will
Okay.
try, I'll try to answer two different ways, on, on one hand, on the other, with your permission.
Yes, sir.
You could caulk it, fix the piping, slap a coat of paint on, and have yourself a swimming pool.
Okay, no, okay.
Okay. When you get going into this thing, you could replace the gutter next year. You live with it, live with your gutter for 1 year. So you could pick and choose. I mean, we would need to have a little bit more information, but we could help prioritize that list of cost estimates as to what would have to be done based upon a couple of scenarios.
Mhm.
So we could prioritize it, if that's something that you want. But I think,
I guess I'm thinking the other way. Well, of the 500,000, are there more things that could be done that would give us the
Extra years.
15, try to stretch that out? Are there other things that we could do just by spending another 10, 15, 30? Or is your report comprehensive enough that it's pretty much everything that should be done?
it's comprehensive for, I think, for beginning discussion here.
Okay.
We try to anticipate everything. I mean, we've got buried pipes
Yeah,
issues.
understood, right.
And we have, the stainless steel panels that are letting go in the deep end of the pool, they could let go, next fall or next spring in the shallow end of the pool.
Mhm.
So we don't know. I mean, that's a problem with doing renovation work. It's just, and that's where we came up with that 50% rule, because if that's gonna be 50% of it, sometime worth the money to go and spend. So for $500,000 or $750,000, you can build yourself a fairly decent brand new swimming pool, as opposed to putting $500,000 into a 30-year-old pool with some unknowns.
Well, and for comparison's sake, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
For comparison's sake, then, to build a pool, if we did the Z shape, for argument's sake, comparing comparables, if we did the Z shape and it's some 650 to 750, to build a new pool with those same depths, same configuration, all new, for us to figure out where that 50% is, we need to know what that new price is.
Yeah, well, that's why I gave you some square footage prices.
It's $100 to $150 per square foot is.
$150 a
Oh,
square
okay.
foot. That's why I gave you that pricing on some different, three different construction techniques.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Shields, one last thing. I'm not real clear, we talked about pool, that if you could talk a little bit more about the floor having to be raised. Because then, again, the deck's affected. I didn't understand why.
Well, you want to make it watertight.
Okay.
So if you just shoot walls, then you've got new concrete on the walls, and you got old concrete on the floor, and you got a building leak issues. So you're going to have to shoot, you're going to have to build a boat inside of a boat.
Okay.
Okay? So it's not a problem on the width and width, because you can bring them in 16 inches. The problem is now you have to bring the floor up.
See, that's why I wasn't understanding why you raised the floor, though, up above the deck, where you'd have to redo the deck then.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's where you come up, you have to do some engineering. What does it cost to pull the floor of the pool out and keep the pool at the current elevation versus raising the pool 6 inches and then filling the deck and pouring deck at a 6-inch elevation? Now, I'm not prepared to discuss, right now.
I just wasn't clear, and I appreciate.
Well, yeah, but just understand that the pool now is going to be 8 inches, 8 inches, and 6 inch higher.
Mhm.
And you can either take out the floor and lower the pool, okay, or you've got to raise the pool and then raise the deck.
Can't you just leave it as a
That's what I'm
shallow
saying. I
pool?
didn't understand if it's a little more shallow at that, you wouldn't have to raise it at the deck level.
Well, because it's not a problem at the deep end. It's the
Okay.
problem is at the shallow end, because right now.
That's why I wasn't
You
understanding.
only
it.
have
That's
3.5 foot of depth now.
Makes sense.
And so now you're going to be at 3 foot or something less. So the issue is not so much in the deep end. Deep end is not a problem.
And that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal, but.
The bottom and the
end,
shallow
yes.
end would have to come out in order to maintain that 3.5 foot, or whatever the depths you decide you ultimately want to have.
Thank you.
So if we decide that we just want a 3-foot depth, we wouldn't have to raise the deck.
Well, yes, but then that pool then falls into starting to sound like the high department of hell. The pool, the standard pool is 3.5 foot of depth. And so when you start making it shallower than that, it falls into the category of special pools.
Or special
And then that's
safety.
other issues. I, 3.5, three and a half.
More restrictions?
Yeah.
Understood.
More, three,
That's, answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
so, yeah, well, it's an interesting deal. They're working with the state regulatory agencies.
What other questions does the committee have at this point?
You started to touch on something when you were answering the mayor's question. It was one of the questions I had was, could this be done in phases, or is it just gonna make it cost prohibitive to do it that way?
Both, the answer to both those are yes.
That's what I thought.
But I guess the phases, we were more talking about fixing the existing as opposed to starting.
The answer was they would be more expensive, and, but you could do it, we'd have to set, you know,
Priorities.
get maximum for your buck, maximum benefits for your buck.
Could we do it in a phase where we rebuild a pool or build a new pool and then deal with the bathhouse later?
Well, I think, you know, I wasn't involved in the bathhouse. The bathhouse has to meet ADA requirements also.
Yeah, this doesn't include anything with the bathhouse,
No, it
right?
doesn't.
I have that information with me.
As far as how much it would cost
Yeah.
to get that ADA compliant?
Versus
Do
the
we
new
even
one.
wanna know?
It's not bad.
Using the existing one?
Yes.
Because I'm with Denny, I think long-term, we want to look at upgrading that too, especially if we build a new pool
I
here.
agree.
It's probably outlived its
We can
usefulness.
make that bathhouse compliant for about 30,000.
But I don't know that it's going to be enough of a challenge to find the money to either fix this correctly or build a new one on that site, let alone adding the bathhouse into it right now.
And the fencing.
Are we, as a committee, ready to move on from the idea that maybe we just can't afford the aquatic center? And I'm not saying we have to answer that right now, I guess I'm just, because what I'd like to do is ask the administration to give us some kind of direction on, I know.
Oh,
the
you
three-
mean the aquatic center versus repairing the pool?
Repairing, or just rebuilding the
replacing.
pool, but it's not gonna be to the extent of.
The water park.
Right.
The water park.
I still think part of this process, again, we're gonna have to come up with funding for it. We're gonna have to find some way to involve the public to find out what they want, what they're gonna be willing to pay. Nobody's gonna wanna pay new taxes, I understand that, and we got a couple emails today, suggestions of going to the business community out asking for fundraisers or donations to accomplish this, and that's an option, I agree, but my goal is, this is the second season that the pool's gonna be closed. And I do think it has an impact. If we just fix exactly what we have now and not replace and not redo, I understand in those dimensions, we're never gonna be cost effective. We're never going to, make enough money to operate that facility. But I do think if nothing else, if we can address the bathhouse, address the aesthetics of the pool area, along with replacing the current pool, I mean, I would be in favor, instead of just replacing within. I think we could maybe not be, money neutral yearly with operations, but I think that more people would utilize the pool than had utilized it in the last, few years. And I do, and as I think most people on council and administration do think the pool is an asset to the city. So as far as the aquatic center, when we're starting to get public opinion, if that's something they're demanding and they're willing to pay for, I'd be all for it. But I do think, just from the conversations I've had and the context I've had, people, even though they didn't may not have used the pool, they want to know why the pool isn't there, so.
I think the aquatic center seemed like a more favorable option when we were looking at a much higher cost to repair it. Speaking from, with people that specifically in my ward, they just want a pool to go
Right.
play in the summer. For the reasons I've said before, that they don't have anywhere else to go. That's their, you know, they can't afford to go on vacations. That's their summer. They go to the pool
Right.
every summer. I don't think they would care less whether it was a big aquatic center with all the fancy slides and, or just a pool to go to splash around the water. But that's just talking about people in my ward. I haven't, you know, I don't know what the general public thinks.
You just worry the bigger it gets, or the more features and everything, we're not gonna get this done anytime soon.
No, I agree.
That's what I'm struggling with. I don't wanna have year after year of waiting for this to.
I think more people, again, I'm specifically people in Ward 1, I think more people in Ward 1 would just rather see a pool get open in the existing spot than to start putting something off for a few more years, talking about the aquatic center.
But it sure sounds like as far as in the existing spot, it's not that much more expensive to start new.
Right.
as
Well,
opposed-
I know, when you start talking 650, 700,000, when you're talking $150 a square foot for the same size, that's 900,000.
Right. Even if you take the mid-range, that's what I was just going there, if you take the mid-range of 140, which is between 130 and 150 for brand new, times 6,000 or 7,000, the repairs are greater than
Right.
50. And then there's also the risk of something else going wrong behind that was okay today. And it may not be in the next year or two, but when we're talking about, I think we would all like to see 12, 15, 20 years in duration without having any issues at all. And my fear is to put that much money in it, and then 2 to 3 years down the road from now, we scratch our
Something
heads on how to
major.
come up
Yeah.
with more.
I agree with you.
No, even if you do, let me do that one more time, because I started to get through too quick. Yeah, it's 980,000, if you take 140 times 7,000 square feet, and I was getting that from the 6,000, and then adding the 30 by 30 for another 900, so it's not quite 7,000, but for round numbers, it's close enough. So you're comparing 980 to 500, 600, 750. Even if we would rebuild the existing and then add the extra 30 by 30. I guess that's the balance, and that's the direction we need from council. We can do the legwork and sort all of that out, but are my numbers making sense so far? Okay.
But none of that will include a bathhouse,
Correct.
No, I think
fencing, that stuff, that's all additional.
Exactly. And
but
some
that's
of
where the
those- some of-
phases might have to start then.
Exactly. And the pump house and pumps, filters, with the exception of the piece they borrowed and the heat exchanger, you know, those things are newer, so they may be able to last a while. The bathhouse, we haven't, but that may be a project that we could talk to the Career Center about and see. I mean, they're generally looking for sites
Projects.
near the school, sites that give them electrical, water, construction, you know, a variety of disciplines. And again, this would do that. You can't beat the price if we can get on their schedule. It's literally the materials.
Right.
So that's just, it's an option we haven't gotten that far yet with, so.
Mayor, you mentioned that if you could get some direction, I guess that's where I was trying to get the committee toward, is that, you know, are we talking just fixing the existing, are we talking building a new? Are we done with this idea of a aquatic center?
I think we're done with the, well,
I agree.
I personally think we're
I
done
am
with the
too.
aquatic center.
And I would lean towards the new.
A new pool
versus
versus
And that's
repair.
what I'm leaning toward as well.
With or without the add-on of the Z?
I would like to see the add-on.
Okay, that's kind of where I'm at too.
Chairman, what will drive this is your existing mechanical equipment, since you don't want to replace it. So it has a maximum performance. So your maximum performance then will dictate the size of the pool.
Okay.
Well, and you said we're gonna lose, putting a pool inside a pool, we're gonna lose inches.
Right, but the size of the pool will be, the maximum size of the pool will be dictated about the maximum output of the filtration and pumpage.
Right. My comment would lean towards, even though we may be adding this little kiddie area or zero depth area, by losing footage at both ends because of putting a pool inside a pool, hopefully our filtration system would be able to handle, even if we're adding on this.
Yeah. Well, that's something that would come in the design stage.
Okay.
So the size and numbers could vary in order to meet that, because we don't want to replace all that.
No, right.
It's already been replaced, so we're going to use what we have, and it has a maximum output.
And, right, and we would make up some of that though by taking the
Depth.
8 foot to 5 foot.
Yes.
Yes, so that would offset some
Yes.
of it.
Yes.
And I think what his point is, because we're not talking about a pool in a pool, right? We're talking about new.
New.
Okay, so.
I'm just talking about new.
Right.
Okay, so that being said,
I thought you were
sorry,
talking
it'd still
about
be a pool
constructing.
inside.
It would be inside.
It's still a
Yeah,
pool
it's still a
inside the
pool,
pool,
right? We're using the same
Just adding infrastructure.
footprint.
Can you do
no,
that?
I thought we're talking, isn't the brand new at the 130 to 150 square foot?
Yes, but what you do, yes, there's going to be some savings there, because now you're not doing excavation. We don't have those numbers, Mayor. I mean,
Okay.
this would have to be designed. So we used the 100 to 150 was based upon building a brand-new swimming pool at some other location, okay, on the grounds.
So total excavation and everything?
Everything, okay?
Okay, so in this case, if we took everything that was there and ended up with the hole.
Then there's going to be some cost savings.
Right.
So we just don't know what those are.
Okay.
Very good.
And I do though, in that analysis, we are gonna figure out a way to not have that common wall anymore though, right? There would be work, if we're gonna do,
But
start with the
then
new.
we're gonna end up with some excavation further west.
Well, it could very well be. I mean, we're getting into the weeds a little bit here. And, but the point is, if we can build the wall against that existing wall, then that's fine too. I mean, there's a lot of things that, when you get into the design stage, this is gonna be more expensive, A is gonna be more expensive than B, so guess what, we're gonna do B.
Does that answer your request then?
I think so, Mayor, does that give you enough?
Yeah, I think so, I guess, and I guess I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit. It may be that if that pump will handle X, by maybe bringing the walls in 6 inches, by bringing the floor up, by configuring it, it's not exactly what the pool is now
Right.
with the add-on, but anybody getting in it is not gonna notice the difference. Right. So I think his point is well made, that we have to make sure that the physical plant, unless we want to replace all of that, which then is other expenses we hadn't planned on, can handle whatever capacity we get we're going for, so.
And that's what I got out of it.
And that, yeah, that analysis has yet to be done, so.
So do you need a motion then?
I'd like to make one more. I don't lowball my estimates. If anything, they're high.
Thank you. Mayor, what do you think at this point? I mean, I guess I'm thinking it's hard for us to move anything out of here without starting to see some numbers here, whether we bring it back to finance when we have a little bit better idea. I guess we at least know as a committee, trying to give you some direction. I think there was a majority of council who wanted to do something where we wanted to still be in the pool business.
Right. Yeah, I think I would feel better if we kept it in the committee and give us a chance, you know, be it with cameras, be it through further research, you know, what's it gonna take for us to analyze what we have now and what we want to move towards. And then when we can have some firmer numbers, even if it's ranges, you know, then come back and make sure that this committee is still comfortable to making a recommendation then to the finance committee, and then we'll work it through, if that's okay.
And that will give us
with
some
you all.
time to maybe look at some funding options too, once we have a better idea of what the ranges might be.
Yes, sir. Right.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask Chuck, and so Jansen and I are on the same page. I had Mark from Van American ask me if we wanted to estimate that leak, potential leak area, and I told him at this point we're on hold, so I don't think until,
Well, there's a couple of things. I think that the administration council are going to have to come up with what path, what direction they want to go. And then whether they want to open the pool on a short-term basis. Well, and then if they do, then that triggers other actions. And if you know, you're going to need an architect to design this thing, and that's somebody that needs to be brought in early, and so that he's or she is involved with this whole thing. So I think that my recommendation is, if you have no intention of opening the pool this year, that I wouldn't fix that until you determine whether you're going to fix that pool or whether you're going to replace it. Once that decision is made, then going in and fixing the bottom inlets are probably appropriate if you decided that if you're going to fix that pool, they're going to have to be fixed sometime. So you might as well find out what the issue is and get it fixed.
I think we had resolved as a committee that it wasn't gonna open this summer.
Correct. Right.
And I think the administration feels that way.
Right, yeah, I don't see any way possible we could do it. So. And I also, I'm hearing from you all, I'm also hearing that there's not much interest in putting the money into trying to repair it. So I'm hearing that we want to research what it's gonna take to create a similar size pool with a zero depth entry, and what's the cost of that gonna be?
Because it's sounding like it's not exponentially more expensive to do that as opposed to putting the money in just to fixing the existing. And we don't know how long that would last.
Exactly.
Fixing the existing is the pool, inside the pool, right?
Yes, sir.
And another positive aspect, if we're not looking at an aquatic system, is operating of the facility once it's up and running again should be basically the same as it was prior with the existing pool as far as lifeguards and so forth. I mean, we're not expanding it much more.
Staffing levels, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, operating the pool while it's open.
If I could elaborate on that a little bit. My goal is for us to try and bridge the gap between our annual expenditures and our revenue for the pool. And I think building the pool inside the pool is gonna help us do that. You know, we're spending upwards of $66,000 a year just to run the pool.
Right.
And our revenue is not near that. So by being able to rethink what we want what programs we want there, being able to work with the rec center to have swim lessons, swim leagues, water aerobics, we can take all those things into account and make sure that this new pool can accommodate those, which will help raise expenditures, better serve the community, you know, and put a larger water slide in that's gonna attract the younger kids. And the location itself for our pool is ideal for most city residents. That getting the pool up and running there will pretty much complete that park. We have a dog park, we have multi-use playground structure, a dog park, a pretty large parking lot, and a brand-new pavilion. And when you take into account the
Yeah,
suburbs
golf.
of Medina.
Frisbee golf, yeah.
Yeah, when you take into account the suburbs of Medina and the Fox Meadows pool, the Medina Country Clubs and the Medina Hills, and, you know, Washington Court going out of business, bringing a new feature into Medina is gonna be very important and help boost revenues. That's how I
And I
feel
think
about
you're
it.
right.
If you went with a whole new pool idea, would you still try to push for it to be open by next summer? Or would you have to push it?
That's our hope.
By next
That
year,
would be the
yes.
hope.
That's our hope.
Just just have to see how much that's gonna cost and how we're gonna pay for it. And then I think we do what we need to do to get the bathhouse ADA compliant, but then the second phase would be addressing that. I like the career center idea.
Yeah, I can ask Nino to do some research on that once, they're hoping this fall to get into the firehouse project. So, you know, whether it would be done before it opens or not is questionable unless they have time in the second half of the year. If not, we may be looking at the fall of 15. But even if we had to squeak by one more year with a brand new pool and then renovate it.
Yeah.
But I think if the public knew we had a plan in place, it would make sense to everybody.
Mark, do you have anything from council?
No, I'm happy to hear committees decided to go away from this big aquatic center, because one, cost-wise, I wasn't real excited about it, and I honestly don't know if we need something to that magnitude. I do think, like the rest of you, we need something new. I'm not excited about just putting a liner in or something that we're gonna have to deal with in 10 years. I want something in place, basic, but structurally sound, that's gonna last 20 or 30 years, and we don't have to worry about this for a while, and I like that we're gonna try to use existing infrastructure, the pumps and stuff like that. So, I mean, the direction the committee's going, on board with you guys. I mean, I just wanna, something new that's, longevity's gonna be there, but something basic, and then look at some of the other areas, like expanding the lawn area out, so people have more area there to sit out and relax. And the bathhouse, that'll be a work in progress, but if it's 30,000 now to get at least ADA acceptable, then that's what we do in the short term and look at something long. But yeah, I'm with you guys on that.
Okay. All right, any other business for public properties today?
Thank you, sir.
We are adjourned. Thank you.